I know how to eat healthy, I just can't stick with it. This is the number one comment I hear from women over 40 who are trying to figure this out. Smart women, right? Women leaders, women who are good at all kinds of things, that are amazing people, saying, I just can't stick with what I know. And so I wanted to talk about what is going on with the psychology here so you can understand it doesn't have to be hard or anything. It's just, there's more psychology to this than people understand, which is why me as a psychologist, I got really excited as I started to understand because I spent many, many years trying to figure out how to eat healthy and how to lose weight, right? And I just wasn't getting anywhere. And I started realizing you're misunderstanding the psychology here. And I had to really break away from the popular media and the things that were being taught out there because they were really leading me astray. So I want you to see how you might be getting led astray and how you can take charge of your own psychology to finally get a breakthrough here. I really want to help you understand what's going on with our psychology here, right? So our psychology includes our mindsets and our beliefs and our habits, right? And so here's one of the things we tend to do wrong when we're thinking about habit change. Most of this I'm going to illustrate through my own experience. Our beliefs and mindsets get in the way of changing our habits, right? So we often jump straight to habit change. Today, I'm going to stop eating this way. I'm going to start eating healthy. Today, I'm starting a diet. Tomorrow, I'm starting a diet. We jump right into habit change, and we completely underestimate the psychological pieces that keep our habits running. The great thing about this is we can change our psychology. We can leverage our psychology to change our habits and even get to an effortless enjoyment of truly healthy eating habits that allow us to get slender and live slender for good. I often forget to say who I am. I'm Dr. Ginny Trierweiler. I help women over 40 get slender for good and say goodbye to dieting forever. Like, we don't want to keep dieting in our lives, right? We want to find a way of eating that works and do it for the rest of our lives. Does that sound good to you? That's what I wanted. We reset our systems to crave the good. And then you get to enjoy living in a healthy sized body that you might have thought was lost forever. And you also get to enjoy tons of improved vitality and health, right? I keep a running list of about 100 women that I asked, how has your health changed? And I get a whole bunch of answers in the gut microbiome category, the digestion category, and I get a whole bunch of answers in the pain and inflammation category. For me, I'd lived with pain and inflammation for 35 years or something, taking more and more medication, suffering more and more, right? And even getting to the point where I could barely walk, and all that disappeared when I changed my eating and drinking. So the health improvements are massive, and also turning around prediabetes, going off statins, improving blood pressure and arterial functioning, and all these major diseases that people tend to develop along with weight gain that go together, the set of metabolic conditions, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and dementia. So we can change all this by learning to eat in a truly healthy way that changes everything, right? And by coming to crave the good stuff. So we're not constantly battling against, but I want that, I love that, right? So let's look at what the problems are here. The psychological challenges to changing our habits when it comes to our eating are bigger than we realize. When we say, I'm just going to do this today, I'm just going to start tomorrow, we're underestimating how much our brain wants to maintain the status quo, wants to maintain our habits, right? So in my case, I thought I knew how to eat healthy because I wasn't gaining weight through my 20s and 30s. I could eat anything and nothing ever seemed to have any effect on me. And then by 55, I was like, I think it is having an effect on me, right? I was 60 pounds overweight. I had all this pain and inflammation throughout my system that I didn't realize was so caused by my eating and drinking. I was pre-diabetic. I was having trouble walking. because of the pain and inflammation. It wasn't going in a positive direction. And I had this big wake-up call. A lot of you have heard my story, but I started working in nursing homes at age 55, and I saw that the people there were in their 60s and 70s mostly. And when I researched the diseases that landed them there, they were this package of diseases that we see with the way of eating that is happening in our society now. Basically, if you try to eat a little bit better than the way people in our society eat, instead of eating in a whole different way, you're going to have maybe slightly later heart disease or cancer or diabetes. Most of us are going to end up with these diseases in our 60s or 70s, some of us earlier. So I finally got really clear. Everything I'm doing isn't working anymore. I had done Weight Watchers. I had done various programs. I had read certain books. I'm smart. I'm dedicated. I'm just going to change this tomorrow. I'm going to read this book and I'm going to eat this way, right? And I'm the kind of person that can usually achieve what I set out to achieve when I do that. But I was getting nowhere with the dieting, right? So I decided I need to, this is real. I'm headed for the nursing home, if I'm honest, and I need to change this. So I put away all the popular media, all the diet books, etc., and instead went straight to the research. And I discovered what it takes, how you need to eat to actually get great results, what your body actually needs. That when we see people eating this way, all these diseases seem to evaporate, and the excess weight evaporates, and people live healthy for a long, long time. I want to live healthy to the end of my life. I want to feel well to the end of my life. And now that I've studied this stuff, longevity, for a long time, I believe that should be more like our 90s. We shouldn't be getting these serious illnesses in our 60s and 70s. If we're eating right, we don't. Most of us don't have to. Is there anybody who could get these diseases who eats beautifully? Yes, but that's not mostly what's happening, right? So part of what was going on for me is one of the first things when I would think about dieting, right, is I'm going to start dieting Monday, right? And I'm going to read this book and I'm going to start on Monday and I'm going to change my behavior. My psychology was totally fighting me. And eventually, because I'm a psychologist, I started noticing this, right? So I want to illustrate a little bit through my story. So one thing that was happening is I was having this fear. This is going to suck. This is going to be miserable. I'm going to have to deprive myself of the things I love. There's a whole bunch of psychology in there, right? The things I love. I love food. I love non-nutritious food. I love highly processed non-nutritious food-like substances. That's what I love. I just started slowing down to check what I was saying. We say this all the time in our society. So there's all this training into this psychology of, I love the things that aren't good for me. The other statements that went with that, the other ideas, the other psychology that went with that is, I'll just have a little. I won't have too much. I started training myself to catch those thoughts. I'll just have a little. Am I saying this is bad for me, but a little won't be that bad? The other thing I would say to myself is, I'll make up for it tomorrow, right? This doesn't make any logical sense. It doesn't make any sense when you study human biology, but it's something we've said to ourselves and each other so long that it's part of our psychology. One of my clients recently said to me, I'm starting to do the eating that you're teaching me and it makes sense, but it doesn't feel right. At the end of the day, at the end of the meal, like for example, without having dessert, it doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. And like a lot of emotion and upset about that feeling that something is missing. I feel like something's missing. This is part of the psychology. When we've developed a habit and a set of associations, when we're trying to change our habits, we're going to have this kind of profound feeling that this is wrong. This feels wrong. And that's because our primitive brain is very dedicated to holding on to the habits that we have. Our primitive brain believes we are surviving because of our habits, which it's kind of right about in general. Like eating needs to become pretty habitual. We can't have to think really hard about it and be very successful. It needs to become habit, right? Like you ever drive somewhere, you ever drive home and realize, I don't know how I got home. I wasn't thinking while I was doing it. I was on autopilot, right? Our eating tends to be on autopilot. So to get really successful with healthy eating, it needs to become an autopilot kind of habit. But in the meanwhile, in order to get to a whole new set of habits, we have to go through this morass of psychology telling us, this is scary, you shouldn't do this. You know, you shouldn't change this. There's even, you don't quite hear it this way, but it even feels a little like our survival is threatened. Like when you think about feeling really scared or upset, like, okay, Ginny, but what are you going to ask me to give up? Like that sounds terrifying. Like you're going to ask me, if you ask me to give up my wine, forget it. If you ask me to give up my chocolate, I'm not doing it. So any kind of like panic we have about giving things up is a natural part of our primitive brain saying we need to stick with the habits we've got, right? So you have to walk yourself through that. I often say we need to reassure ourselves. We need to do some self-soothing. No, we're just changing some habits. Like one of the things that I did in the first year of changing my eating is I would have chamomile and mint tea at the end of a meal. So it was replacing an old habit of having candy or chocolate or whatever with a new habit of having tea. It helped to not just stop the habit, like, and it just sit there with all that sense of conflict. It helped to put something else in there. But what I want you to know is that that feeling that this is wrong, it's wrong, is just your primitive brain trying to maintain the status quo and keep the habits. We don't have to be scared of it, and we don't have to give in to it. We have to be a little aware of it at first, right? The great thing about this is once you establish the healthy eating habits, your primitive brain will try to sustain those. But at first, it feels wrong because you're trying to change habits and your brain thinks that's really scary. It fiercely defends the habits you have. So you can feel like, I just don't have very good willpower. And it's because willpower is not the best way to change these things. We need to have more awareness and more intentionality, right? So I'm just going to start eating healthy. I'm just going to start this diet on Monday. I'm just going to is really underestimating the psychological shifts that need to happen for you to succeed, right? We have years of operant conditioning, of pairing certain things with certain situations, right? So any kinds of associations that, you know, this feels like what breakfast has to be. Going to a wedding, I have to have champagne. Those two things are associated, right? Going out for a steak dinner, I have to have red wine. These two things are associated. It's a Pavlov's dog situation, this operant conditioning. I started remembering all of the things I studied in psychology school, all the things I was helping other people with, and I started applying the psychology to my eating habit changes. And then I started getting breakthroughs. I found a way of eating that works, and I started applying what I knew about psychology to my eating, right? So we get stuck in habit loops. That's part of our psychology. And eating is very habitual. We need to interrupt the current associations to disrupt our habits. And this takes some attention, some awareness, and some time, right? Another problem psychologically is that we swim in waters that talk about dieting. What we got to do is diet. We got to deprive ourselves for a little while, right? But it's just temporary, and then we'll go back to eating the way we used to eat. So those are terrible ideas that are not going to add up to good results, but we live with those ideas around us all the time. The idea that I'm going to, you know, indulge in this stuff tonight, but I'll make up for it tomorrow with exercise is not how our body works. Our body doesn't work that way. If we put something toxic into our system, our body is going to have toxicity that it's got to deal with, and it's going to do what it does to deal with the toxicity. We're not going to make up for that tomorrow. That's not how it works. So the diet mentality, there's a whole bunch of statements, there's a whole bunch of ideas and beliefs that just seem right to us because we've heard them so many times, we've said them so many times. They're not serving us. I do a whole event, a 5-hour event. Next time is coming up in March, where I teach about why we have to get away from dieting, both in terms of what works physically for our body and in terms of what works psychologically for making the changes we need to make. It is absolutely unfair to beat yourself up for failing at dieting. Dieting is failing you, and I like people to understand that. So if you're not on my mailing list, go to slenderforgood.com and make sure that you get my roadmap to sustainable weight loss, why you must stop dieting if you want to lose the weight, get slender for good, right? All right, so there's also these cultural ideas, like we should moderate all things. You know, you shouldn't step away from something that's bad for you. You should just have a little of it, and it's not that bad for you, right? Just moderate it. This idea of we should moderate all things also doesn't make sense. Why would we moderate all things? It sounds very, I don't know, warm and fuzzy. It sounds like a great idea, and we say it to ourselves and to each other all the time. What I came to realize is what I'm wanting to moderate is stuff that's actually addictive. And moderation of something that's actually addictive is a great way to be obsessed with something that you don't want to be obsessed with, right? If I feel like I think I'm drinking too much for my health, I need to drink less, I'm going to drink less, right? I've been drinking this amount and now I'm going to drink this amount. I'm trying to moderate something that's truly addictive, and that's a great way to drive a sense of obsession. How much am I going to have? I wasn't going to have this today. Okay, I won't have it tomorrow, right? It's a great way to get really caught up in this has become super important to be thinking about all the time, negotiating about all the time. We don't want to moderate things that are actually addictive. Even the idea of moderating something that's toxic to my system. This is bad for me, but I won't have too much of it. And besides, this is a better version of the thing that's bad for me. That's very popular in our culture, this idea that there's healthier versions. When I would go to Whole Foods and go up the health foods aisle, right? I was looking for healthier versions of energy bars, which are basically looking for a better option candy bar, right? So these kinds of ideas are really leading us astray. We just swim in these waters. We say it to ourselves and each other all the time. And then we believe I can moderate things that are addictive for me. It's okay if I eat or drink things that are bad for me because I can make up for it tomorrow. It doesn't make any sense, but I believe it because I've said it so many times and I've heard it so many times, right? So this is part of the psychology we want to change. One of the things I said to myself all the time was, I had a really hard day and people were mad at me and I'm really upset. I wasn't going to drink and eat all the things tonight, but I am going to drink and eat all the things because I need it and I deserve it. I don't do anything nice for myself. I don't take the good vacations, right? I deserve this. So I just started catching any of those statements. I deserve this. Am I saying that about something that's good for me? Or am I only saying that about things that are bad for me? Maybe I want to rethink what I deserve, right? So there's a lot of cultural ideas that feed our psychology that keep us, I don't know if you know that on average, the average American now, most of the food we're eating could be better classified, 57% or more, could be better classified as cravingful, highly processed, non-nutritious food-like substances. Most of what we're eating now. This is why our health and our weight has become so troublesome in such a short period of time. We now think getting heart disease or diabetes is normal. in our 60s or 70s. It's only normal because of the way we're eating, not because we're aging. We're eating this way, eating this way, eating this way, saying I'm going to change tomorrow. It's going to add up to disease, right? All right, so the least nutritious food-like substances are designed to give extra pleasure. This is why we say, I love them. This is why we feel panicked about the idea that anyone would suggest we give them up. They are designed to be truly addictive, right? So anything you feel panicked about giving up, or you feel, strongly attached to, obsessed with, I would hate to give that up, consider that that may be an addictive process. That may be proof that it's non-nutritious. It may be proof that it's toxic to your body, and it may be proof that it's addictive. So once I started realizing that, but I really want to keep at least a little of this, it's really important to keep at least a little of this, I started realizing, the psychology here. That's a great way to stay in obsession with something that you're concluding is bad for you. Like maybe I need to intentionally stop looking for proof that it's not that bad and intentionally look for proof that counteracts this cultural message that it's not that bad. All right, I'm going to say one more thing about the problem, the psychological challenges here and obstacles here, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what we can do about them. So here's another one. Emotional eating is very encouraged, right? And it becomes a self-sustaining habit. One person submitted a question before this event saying, I want to know if I should go see like a therapist, a psychologist, before I even try doing weight loss. And she didn't tell me a lot about what that was about, but it's an interesting question, right? Is there something psychologically wrong with me that I need to get addressed before I can take on the dieting, the healthy eating kinds of changes, the weight loss changes? I always think finding a therapist for yourself, great idea. It's very nice to have a therapist. It's very nice to have someone to just go talk through the things that your friends would get bored with, right? They just don't want to hear about it. But I think it's normal, it's common, it's to be expected that there's going to be a bunch of psychological barriers to changing your eating in a very healthy way. There's a bunch of cultural barriers, which I talk a lot more about in my event that's coming up in March. And there's a bunch of psychological barriers. We can change those. This is why people sometimes ask, you're not a nutritionist. Like, why should you lead me in changing my eating? Well, I did discover the nutritional principles that work predictably because I'm a scientist and I knew how to look at the research. And it is very different from 99% of the diets you're going to find out there. And it works. It works hundreds of times better than other approaches, other diets out there. But what I found is, like, for the first couple of years, I would try to just hand it to people. And they couldn't do it. There's too much sustaining. There's too much psychology and culture sustaining our bad habits. It just feels really hard without making the psychological changes that make all the difference, right? And that's what I'm expert in. That's what I studied in college and grad school for 15 years. That's what I've been helping people with for 25 years. And that's what I finally realized. Yes, you need a way of eating that works, but you also need to be changing your psychology, right? You also need to be making the shifts that will start to make this get habitual and easy. So what can we do about the fact that our own psychology is being turned against us? That we have grown up every day of our lives developing this psychology that keeps our current habits going. We can take back our own psychology, right? That's the great news. That isn't a read a book and change your behavior situation, but we can take back our psychology with intention, with determination. Like, I want my own brain back. I thought of it as, I'm being hypnotized every day to want the things that are bad for me, to love the things that are bad for me, to tell myself it doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. This isn't going to hurt anything. And anyway, if it does, I can make up for it tomorrow, right? I need to take back my own psychology. I actually studied hypnosis and self-hypnosis to help myself get my psychology back on track. Because if I'm being hypnotized day in and day out to prefer the non-nutritious food-like substances, and to believe it doesn't hurt anything to eat those, and to believe the highly nutritious food is kind of boring, right? If I'm being hypnotized day in and day out toward all those ideas that are leading me to illness and excess weight, etc., I'm going to need to be a little bit intentional. I'm going to need to put a little bit of time in every day to changing my psychology, taking it back. So we want to change our mindsets. We want to resist the promotion of highly processed, non-nutritious food-like substances as treats, right? As self-care. Is it really self-care to be eating and drinking things that are bad for me and then having to go to doctors for, more and more pain medications? I was exploring surgery for my feet, etc. Is that really self-care? So I wanted to change my mind about what self-care is. Like, it's not just caring about what will feel good right now, what will feel exciting, but if I think of myself 10 years from now as me, if I think of the lady 20 years from now who's 84, like if I think of her as me, self-care means taking care that that lady gets to live a really good life and still be active. It's not just what feels good right now, right? I want to resist the promotion of ideas like everything in moderation. Everything? Heroin? Am I going to drink gasoline in moderation? Which is a little similar to what we're doing when we drink alcohol, right? Might be freaking some people out with that. So I really wanted to become very aware of the thoughts and feelings that were sustaining the bad habits. But I love it. It'll feel miserable. Well, do I love it? Is that true? Is that really true? Well, does it have to feel miserable? What if it feels great? What if I feel great? I started taking charge of my psychology, right? I started intentionally developing a psychology that would support good habits, that would give me the life I want, not just a few moments of pleasure, but feeling great every day, right? I had terrible insomnia. Now I wake up every day feeling really good. That is a complete transformation in my life, right? So we can become very intentional about healthy eating choices and how we want to feel eating healthy. I want to feel like I love the food that's good for my body. And I want to let go of the feelings that I love the food-like substances that are bad for my body and bad for my brain, right? So I wanted to focus on how do I want to feel? Like when I put together a plate of really nutritious food, I want to feel like, yum. That is abundant, that is beautiful, that is life-giving. I love that. So, noticing, I don't want to keep saying I love the things that are bad for me. I want to intentionally find ways to love the things that are good for me, right? So intentionally caring about my future self and coming to crave the good foods. So I developed this Crave the Good system, how we go from craving, and I craved all the sweet things and all the salty, crunchy things and the wine and cocktails, etc. I craved all those things. And I wanted to get all the way over to, I crave the things that are actually good for my body, and I don't crave the things that are bad for my body anymore. And that didn't happen by just deciding, okay, I'm going to crave the good things now. It was a little bit of a process, but it wasn't painful. It was gorgeous, right? So this is one of the things I help my clients go through, is this crave the good process. Because when you crave the good stuff, eating in a way that gets you slender for good and lets you keep eating that way the rest of your life is not hard. And my clients tell me this all the time. This isn't hard. I know, right? And that's a bit of a mindset shift. Now, the one other piece I want to say about changing our psychology is we really want our new eating habits, our healthy eating habits, to become habits. We want them to be what we're doing day in and day out, because our primitive brain will put us on autopilot with that. It'll say, this is what we do. We love this. This keeps us alive. Let's just keep doing it, right? And so it will start to get easy and effortless. What our world is going to tell us to do is dabble in a little of this and a little of that all the time. in a way, the let's moderate all things, right, is encouraging us that way. Like, I'm going to moderate drinking. I tried moderating for 40 years. I never was very successful at it, right? It didn't work. It's because it's an addictive substance. That was a terrible idea. And it led me to dabbling in this and dabbling in that, right? I'll eat healthy today so I can drink tonight. My body doesn't work that way. It was damaging my body. Another thing that in our society that encourages us to dabble is every day, all the magazines and all the blogs are putting out the latest tip. Here's a great tip, here's some, and supplements are being encouraged all the time. This is encouraging us to dabble instead of learning how to eat healthy and just doing that on autopilot. We're constantly looking for the latest tip. That's being encouraged. So this is a part of our psychology we need to take charge of. I'm going to figure out what the healthy habits are, and I'm going to make them so habitual, and I'm going to quit fiddling with them, because fiddling with them keeps them from ever getting easy, right? So we can crave the good. Now, I have to acknowledge that knowing what the good foods are is not easy. In our current environment, I had to take all my scientific training. I had to leave the popular media, all the latest tips and the diet books, etc. And I had to look directly at the research, like what is known to actually make a difference for diabetes risk and for heart disease risk and for longevity and feeling really well and having great energy. I also had brain fog. What's good for my brain in terms of eating? I wasn't looking for, is there some magic food I can eat so I can eat all the bad stuff I want to, but I'll also eat this magic food or eat this magic pill or drink this magic smoothie. I was getting myself out of that whole approach and looking for fundamental principles that would lead me to the weight, like being able to drop the excess 60 pounds and keep it off. Right now, I've kept the 60 pounds off. Losing them didn't feel hard. I have to tell you, once I found the fundamental principles for how to eat, there were 4 of them. I teach my clients these fundamental principles. Once I found them, and I started doing all these psychological shifts, I started noticing what my culture was telling me and standing firmly against it, etc. I got the 60 pounds off. It wasn't hard, and I've kept them off for 6 years or something. I didn't keep track of exactly when it was. This is extremely rare. It doesn't have to be. It's not that hard, but we have to change our psychology. We have to change our habits. But finding the truth about how to actually eat that works, super difficult, virtually impossible in our society. And we end up taking the best information we can get, putting it together with what we like and what we're told. We end up making up a do-it-yourself eating approach. Everyone has to, right? In this world, in our lives, everyone has to come up with their own do-it-yourself eating approach. And I work only with really smart, successful women, and they feel really confident about their eating approaches, right? But they can't stick with it, or they're not getting the results they want. And it's partly because there's too much misinformation mixed in with the things that are true. So they might have it 80% right, and that is just not going to get them the results that they want. So I know for me, as I studied these principles, I was super surprised to learn green smoothies, no, fruit juice, these are not healthy. There's all these things promoted to us as healthy that are helping to drive our illness and our weight gain. So I have to acknowledge it's not easy to find the answers to how to eat, and I do teach that to my clients. I love to help women over 40 learn to change their psychology. This is my expertise, so that you can establish truly healthy, slenderful eating as an effortless habit. So if you'd like to know more about how this works, grab my roadmap to sustainable weight loss after 40 at slenderforgood.com. or reach out to me here on Facebook Messenger and we can schedule a call. When we crave the good, we can become slender for good, right? We're talking habits. We're talking sustainable. We're talking about this is just how I eat and I love it. I do it 3 times a day, every day, without fail. And that makes it easy and effortless, right? So when we crave the good, we can become slender for good. And you deserve that. Let me know if you have any thoughts or questions. All right, take care.